Well, you can think of a budget resolution as being a blueprint for where they're going the rest of the year on appropriations and on decisions about entitlements and tax revenues. The it is not binding, but there are points of order that can be raised, especially in the Senate, with regard to anything that violates the budget resolution. And so it does bring a little bit of discipline to the process. The current budget process was set up by legislation passed in 1974. Before that time, there was nothing in the formal processes of the Congress that even made them add up the implications of all their individual spending decisions or revenue decisions. There was no target for aggregate spending and revenues or the deficit. So on paper anyway, it was a chaotic situation, and the Congress recognized that their processes were very, very weak. The initiative for the legislation started when Richard Nixon, after his huge victory in 1972, began to refuse to spend money on a lot of social programs, monies that the Congress had appropriated. Now, it was clear from the Constitution that a president cannot spend money without an appropriation. It was not clear, however, whether he had to spend money if it was appropriated. And numerous presidents had refused to spend small amounts, often where there was no controversy whatsoever, where a program had gone very wrong and it wasn't reasonable to continue it. But Nixon did it on a massive scale, and the Congress got very annoyed. There were numerous court cases, almost all of which, except for one, the president lost at the U.S. Court of Appeals level. But the Congress felt it had to do something before taking the issue to the Supreme Court. So Nixon challenged them, really, saying just what I just said, that they really didn't have a formal process for putting together a coherent budget. And they recognized that they had to do something, or else they really couldn't control the president's ability to impound funds. So that was the source of the Budget Act. Interestingly enough, Nixon should have known that the act would greatly diminish the influence of a president's budget, because now you had a competing congressional budget. And more important, it set up the Congressional Budget Office to provide technical advice, a field that had been dominated by the President's Office of Management and Budget before that. But Nixon did not veto the legislation because it was just at a time when he was threatened with impeachment, and the administration didn't want to do anything to annoy anyone in the Congress. Technically speaking, if the Congress is unable to pass a budget resolution, you revert to the previous year's resolution, which did set spending limits for 2011 and following years, actually. The problem is that in the Senate, those spending targets are not subject to points of order, so there's no way of really enforcing them. And the whole discipline of the process is much weakened by the fact that they do not have a resolution. But more fundamentally, I think it is very disturbing that the Congress is unable to follow its own budget procedures when we have record-breaking deficits. It really should rattle the confidence of investors in our bonds. Now, frankly, the public's hardly noticed that they're unable to pass a resolution. So far it hasn't been a big issue, but it should be a big issue. Especially on the House side, they are talking about limiting appropriations and putting the limit in some bill that has to pass, war supplemental or something of that sort. Again, they intend to do it quietly and in a non-transparent fashion, so it hardly redeems them. but it may be a way of putting a little discipline into the system.